It's 9 p.m. by the studio clock. You're watching the news on Sansad TV. I'm Teena Jha with all the major news and events from India and the world. Let's begin with the headlines. Potential Third World War would involve nuclear weapons, warns Russian Foreign Minister. Bombings, meanwhile, continue in Ukrainian cities. Indian nationals told to leave Kharkiv immediately. Operation Ganga brings home more people. The Indian Air Force plane leaves for Romania with relief material. India is adopting a calibrated approach on global developments. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu urges everyone to speak in one voice on Ukraine. Joe Biden's State of the Nation address expresses solidarity with the Ukrainian people, announces release of 30 million barrels to keep oil prices stable. Important for India to be self-reliant in a changing world. Prime Minister Modi calls for minimizing dependence on foreign countries in the field of telecommunication. And sixth phase voting in Uttar Pradesh tomorrow. All parties intensify campaigning for the last phase in UP and Manipur. Details on each of these headline stories in just a while, but a quick run-through of what else made news through the day today. Indian Embassy issues urgent advisory, tells Indian nationals in Ukraine to avoid Cheny-Medyaka border. Moldova borders open for Indian students coming from Ukraine, says Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia. E-bill processing system launched. Finance Minister says it will enhance transparency and faceless, paperless payment system. Tax refunds of over 1.83 lakh crore rupees issued to more than 2 crore 9 lakh taxpayers till February. The government invites applications for National Startup Awards 2022 across 17 sectors and 7 special categories. Sensex slumps over 600 points in early trade. Nifty slips below 16,650 level. Kerala High Court dismisses petition filed by Media One TV channel, upholds ban. Examination dates for JEE Main 2022 announced. Registration process begins. Ruling Biju Janata Dal wins 766 seats of the 851 Zilla Parishad seats in Odisha Panchayat elections. And Ujjain enters Guinness Book for lighting more than 11 lakh diyas on Mahashivratri. So let's begin the bulletin with news from Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukraine on Wednesday said Russian operations have killed over 2,000 civilians and destroyed hundreds of structures in the country. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that if a third world war were to take place, it would involve nuclear weapons and be very, very destructive. Here's the latest report. Heavily damaged buildings in Kharkiv show the ferocity of the Russian bombardment. Its Air Force also claimed it had dismantled the main TV tower in Ukraine's capital Kiev, but did not hit residential buildings. Ukraine, however, said at least 5 civilians were killed and 5 others injured. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden addressed his nation on Wednesday.
We're cutting off Russia's largest banks in the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. We're choking Russia's access to technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come.
Russia is calling the sanctions of the Western countries illegitimate. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, with the sanctions, European Union countries were trying to avoid an honest face-to-face dialogue. However, British Prime Minister had his own logic.
But how can you negotiate with somebody whose tanks are rolling towards Kiev and who is bombing innocent civilians? I think it's impossible at the moment, and I think that is the reality.
Ukrainian cities are deserted, citizens living in underground shelters. Essential supply has become a major issue. Citizens who chose to leave are away from home, leading a harsh life. Neighboring nations are giving shelter, but the trauma of war and displacement are certain to linger deep and long. Bureau Report, Sansad TV. As the conflict rages, India is sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine. An IAF C-17 Globemaster aircraft left for Romania with relief material. The aircraft will also bring back Indian nationals from Romania who crossed the border from Ukraine. Besides, India is also sending medicines via Poland.
MEA के साथ पूरे कोऑर्डिनेशन के साथ ये ऑपरेशन चल रहा है. सिविल एयरलाइंस वाले जा ही रहे थे. अब कैपेसिटी इंक्रीज करने के लिए जैसे जैसे बिकॉज हमको सारे अपने सिटीजन्स मैनी ऑफ देम जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं उनको लाना है. तो प्राइमरली C-17 करेंगे जो डायरेक्ट जा सकता है, रुकना ना पड़े, बिकॉज इन एनी केस बाकी एरिया की भी हालत वैसी है. सो एंड ये कंटिन्यूअस राउंड द क्लॉक ऑपरेशन चलेगा.
As India's evacuation process is on in full swing, Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu has expressed confidence that every Indian stranded in Ukraine will be brought back home safely. He said that India is adopting a calibrated approach on international developments, keeping in view the country's national interests. He also urged everyone to speak in one voice to protect the country's interests and not voice anything that will be detrimental to India. The Vice President also deplored the disinformation and misinformation campaign by sections of international media against the Indian democracy. And the government has once again appealed to Indians to leave Ukraine at the earliest. The Indian embassy in Poland's capital, Warsaw, advised stranded Indians in Lviv, Ternopil, and other parts of western Ukraine to reach the Budomir's border post to enter the Polish border. They were also told to avoid Cherny Mediaka, where people are having to stand in long queues to cross the border. The advisory said those entering Poland, where Indian officials are not posted, should leave for Hotel Prezidenki in Jezo city.
There were like open firing to scare every one of us because actually nobody was forming a line. If you form a line, you would pass the border faster.
मालदोवा में हम लोग जब गए थे, वहाँ के स्टूडेंट्स बहुत अच्छे थे. उन लोगों ने हमको फ्री फूड, फ्री अकोमोडेशन, फ्री टैक्सी, फ्री सब कुछ फ्री था और बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे से उन लोगों ने हमारी हेल्प की थी.
मालदो में शायद एम्बेसी की बात हो गई थी, इसलिए हमको मालदो में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं हुई.
हम आराम से 2 दिन शेल्टर में रहे और उसके बाद हमारी इंडियन एम्बेसी ने हमारी फ्लाइट कर दी और हम बड़े ही खुश हैं. फिलहाल घर जा रहे हैं.
As things are getting from bad to worse in Ukraine, the International Atomic Energy Agency is holding a special meeting to discuss the security and safety of Ukraine's nuclear power plants. It has expressed concern for the security of the Chernobyl plant in the wake of the Russian forces taking control of it. Chernobyl, remember, is one of history's worst nuclear disaster that took place 36 years ago.
On 26 April 1986, reactor number 4 exploded at Chernobyl nuclear facility and caught fire deep in the night, throwing radioactive material high into the sky. The 2 million residents of Kyiv weren't informed. The world itself learned of the disaster only after heightened radiation was detected in Sweden. The building was covered in 2017 by an enormous shelter aimed at containing radiation still leaking from the accident.
The main threat per se would be is if the new safe confinement structure is damaged and it essentially is connecting the air of the outside world to the air inside the structure. But the actual sarcophagus in the reactor building itself, we're talking about really thick masses of concrete. It would be very, very difficult for shelling or artillery fire to cause any physical damage which would cause a large problem.
Robots inside the shelter work to dismantle the destroyed reactor and gather up the radioactive waste. It's expected to take until 2064 to finish dismantling the reactors. Ukraine was using this zone for its centralized storage facility for spent fuel from the country's other remaining nuclear power plants. The IAEA says it's extremely important that nuclear power plants are not put at risk in any way by the conflict. Experts say the safety confinement structure around the plant is not built for war, but they are confident the building should stay safe. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
So what has been the fallout of Ukraine-Russia conflict on stock and oil markets and more? We'll tell you in our business and economy section. The conflict in Ukraine is pushing up global oil prices. Brent crude, even after the International Energy Agency agreed to release 60 million barrels of oil from emergency stockpiles. Russia is one of the biggest energy producers in the world, and investors are worried that oil or gas supplies could be affected. However, at the end of the trade, it settled at $110 per barrel. Russia's central bank, meanwhile, suspended stock market trading on the Moscow exchange for the third day in a row on Wednesday. It said, however, it will allow a limited range of operations for the first time this week. Now, this comes after the ruble slumped to a record low and Russian companies listed overseas saw their share prices slide. The uncertainty in global politics also impacted share markets across Asia. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 index fell 1.68% or 451.69 points. The Hang Seng index lost 1.84% or 417.79 points. Singapore's Straits Times fell more than 1% and closed at 3244 levels. However, Korea's Kospi bucked the trend and closed with a minor gain of 0.16%. Taking cue from their Asian counterparts, Indian stock markets also reacted sharply on worsening geopolitical scenario. Bombay Stock Exchange Sensex lost 778 points or 1.3% and closed at 55,469. While NSE Nifty 50 lost around 188 points and closed at 16,606. Meanwhile, the Central Board of Direct Taxes has issued refunds of over 1,83,000 crore rupees to more than 2 crore 9 lakh taxpayers from 1st April 2021 to 28th of February 2022. Income tax refunds of 65,938 crore rupees have been issued in more than 2 crore 7 lakh cases, and corporate tax refunds of 1,17,000 crore rupees have been issued in more than 2,30,000 cases. Moving on, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman launched the electronic bill or e-bill processing system in Delhi on Wednesday. Announced in this year's budget, the Finance Minister said it is part of ease of doing business and Digital India ecosystem. The system is aimed to bring in broader transparency and also expedite payments. The Finance Minister said it will enhance transparency, efficiency, also faceless, paperless payment system by allowing suppliers and contractors to submit their claim online and trackable in real-time basis. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday made a strong pitch for self-reliance in technology-related sectors. Addressing a webinar on technology-enabled development, the Prime Minister said science and technology was closely connected with the digital economy. In fact, he also asserted that the necessary spectrum auctions will be conducted in 2022 to facilitate the rollout of 5G mobile services in 2022 to 23.
तेजी से घरों का निर्माण कर रहे हैं। रेल, रोड, एयरवे, वाटरवे और ऑप्टिकल फाइबर भी अभूतपूर्व निवेश हो रहा है। इसमें और गति लाने के लिए पीएम गति शक्ति के विजन के साथ हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। इस विजन को टेक्नोलॉजी से निरंतर कैसे मदद मिल सकती है, इस पर हमें काम करना होगा।
And on to all the news and views from the poll-bound states. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi held election rallies in Sonbhadra and Ghazipur that will go to polls in the 7th phase in Uttar Pradesh. He said whenever opposition parties got a chance to form the government, he never paid attention to the development of the people. In fact, they never paid attention for people's development. The Prime Minister said those who make fun of the Self-Reliant India campaign can never make the country strong. Listen in.
जो लोग आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान का मजाक उड़ाते हो, जो भारत की सेनाओं का अपमान करते हो, मेक इन इंडिया अभियान का मखौल उड़ाते हो, वो गौर परिवारवादी लोग भारत को कभी ताकतवर नहीं बना सकते.
Voting will be held for 57 assembly seats in the 6th phase in the Uttar Pradesh assembly elections on Wednesday. 676 candidates are in the fray for the elections, spread out over 10 districts, including Ambedkar Nagar, Balrampur, Siddharth Nagar, Basti, Sant Kabir Nagar, Maharajganj, Gorakhpur, Kushinagar, Devariya and also Balia. Polling will be held from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Remember, in the 2017 assembly elections, the BJP had 146 seats and its allies took 2. News now from across other states. Union Home Minister Amit Shah hit out at the opposition parties while addressing a rally in Chandoli. He said earlier bullets and pistols were made in Uttar Pradesh to intimidate and kill people. Today, shells and missiles are being made to protect the country from enemies. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh targeted the opposition party while speaking in Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh. He said the state government had brought far-reaching changes in the system to prevent corruption. In fact, he also asserted that the government is committed to development. Recounting the BJP government's achievements in Mau, Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath said, in the last 5 years, the government had given jobs to 5 lakh people and also facilitated employment for 2 crore youth. He promised a job for at least one member of each family when the BJP forms a government in the state once again. While Samajwadi Party President Akhilesh Yadav promised to fill 10 lakh posts of the state government, while speaking in Jaunpur, he said if his party comes to power, he will fulfill this promise. Addressing the rally, Akhilesh also promised to give relaxation in age limit in jobs to the youth. Continuing with news from states, Union Minister Smriti Irani addressed a program on women's safety in Delhi. She emphasized the need for proper training to help women protect themselves and also their loved ones in difficult situations. The 4-week budget session of the Maharashtra Assembly will begin tomorrow. NCP President Sharad Pawar held a meeting with his party members to decide the strategy. The party also decided that Nawab Malik will not be told to resign. Delhi Water Minister Satyendra Jain inaugurated a 26.80 million litre underground reservoir and pumping station. He said it will end the problem of water in Sonia Vihar. The Bombay High Court directed the Enforcement Directorate to file a reply on a petition by Maharashtra Minister Nawab Malik challenging his arrest in a money laundering probe involving fugitive gangster Daud Ibrahim. Nawab Malik is currently in ED custody till Thursday. Film writer and critic Jaiprakash Choksi passed away at the age of 82 in Indore. He was battling cancer and his health had taken for the worse in the last 3 months. Meanwhile, schools reopened in Mumbai on Wednesday after almost 2 years with 100% capacity. The administration took the decision following a decline in COVID cases according to the old timetable. And time for a short break here, but coming up next, big news from around the world. Do stay tuned.
We all know the importance of good health, but often we don't know how to achieve it. There's plenty of information available, but again, we don't know what is right and what is wrong. To know the truth and get your answers straight from some of India's top specialists, join me, Dr. Amrish Mittal, on Healthy India, only on Sansad TV.
Thanks for staying with us on the news. Let's now get you all the other global updates. In the midst of spiraling inflation and the Ukraine crisis, US President Joe Biden focused his first State of the Union on how in fact he plans to get prices under control. Listen in.
And so we have a choice. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. I think I have a better idea to fight inflation. Lower your costs, not your wages.
The president said, and I quote, "Folks, that means that more cars and semiconductors in America, more infrastructure and innovation in America, also more goods moving faster and cheaper in the country, more jobs where you can earn a good living in America instead of relying on foreign supply chains." In fact, he also spoke about how to make it in America.
Folks, that means make more cars and semiconductors in America, more infrastructure and innovation in America, more goods moving faster and cheaper in America, more jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America.
A quick look at what's happening in other parts of the world. New Zealand police on Tuesday used pepper spray to move hundreds of protesters camping outside the nation's parliament for more than 3 weeks. It was the most significant use of force against the protesters opposing COVID vaccine mandates. Some protesters confronted police and used milk to clear their eyes when they were pepper sprayed. The police said the crackdown will continue till all vehicles and tents are gone. The World Bank approved a plan to use more than $1 billion from a frozen Afghanistan trust fund to finance education, agriculture, health and family programs. The plan will bypass sanctioned Taliban authorities by disbursing the money through United Nations agencies and international aid groups. The bank said it will provide a major boost to efforts to ease the country's worsening humanitarian and economic crisis. Traffic jams and outdoor crowds returned in Philippine cities after businesses and public transport were allowed to operate at full capacity as COVID cases continue to drop. Social distancing is no longer required in Manila and other areas, while restaurants can now remove plastic barriers on tables and also public gatherings. All government employees have been ordered to return to their offices for work. News now from the world of science and technology. Climate change, which is all about extreme weather now, is going to get much worse. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says it could make the world sicker, poorer, and way more dangerous in the next 18 years with an unavoidable increase in risks. Here's a report.
If global warming isn't limited to even 0.2 of a degree, the Earth will degrade in 127 ways, with some being potentially irreversible. The latest IPCC report says these findings are based on unequivocal cumulative scientific evidence. It warns that delaying cuts in heat-trapping carbon emissions will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable future for all. Scientists predict that today's children living in year 2100 will experience 4 times more climate extremes. And if temperatures increase nearly 2 more degrees Celsius, they will feel 5 times more floods, storms, drought, and heat waves. The report estimates that 3.3 billion people's daily lives are highly vulnerable to climate change. They are 15 times more likely to die from extreme weather. The world's poor are hit by far the hardest. More people will die each year from heat waves, diseases, extreme weather, air pollution, and starvation. The numbers will depend on how much heat-trapping gas from burning coal, oil, and natural gas gets spewed into the air and how the world adapts to an ever hotter world. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And now, all the action from the world of sports. The BCCI on Tuesday gave the go-ahead to the Punjab Cricket Association to host the first test between India and Sri Lanka with 50% capacity at the PCA Stadium in Mohali. The decision comes as welcome news for spectators who will have the opportunity to watch Virat Kohli's 100th test match from the stands. Earlier, the PCA had barred spectators for the test versus Sri Lanka due to the COVID situation. Kohli's landmark test in Mohali starts on the 4th of March. Novak Djokovic is splitting up with longtime coach and confidant Marian Vajda. The decision seems to have been taken after the ATP finals last year in Turin. Since the year-end championships, Vajda hasn't been present in Djokovic's box. He did not accompany him to Australia, from where the Serbian star was deported. The head coach for Team Djokovic continues to be Goran Ivanisevic. Top seed Elena Svitolina of Ukraine beat Anastasia Potapova of Russia 6-2, 6-1 in the opening round of the Monterrey Open in Mexico. Svitolina had earlier said she will not play against Potapova or any Russian or Belarusian opponents until the Tennis Federation and the men's and women's tennis tours barred competitors from those countries using any national symbols, flags or anthems. Wearing her national colors of blue and yellow, she, however, decided to play and said she could do more for her country by playing than boycotting the match. At the ATP and the WTA decided that Russian and Belarusian players can no longer compete in team events, including the prestigious Davis Cup, as they condemned Russia's military action in Ukraine. However, Russian and Belarusian players will be allowed to compete on the tour, including Grand Slam tournaments, but not under the flag of their countries. The ITF board also decided to suspend the membership of Russian and Belarusian tennis federations. Meanwhile, many Russian tennis players, male and female, are urging to stop the war in Ukraine. Russians and Belarusians at the Winter Paralympics in Beijing will compete as neutral athletes because of their country's roles in the military activity against Ukraine, according to the International Paralympic Committee. Russian athletes have already been slated to compete as RPC, acronym for Russian Paralympic Committee, as punishment for the state-sponsored doping scandal at the 2014 Sochi Olympics and a subsequent cover-up. The IPC added more restrictions for Paralympics opening on Friday, but stopped short of expulsion. Belarus, meanwhile, was sanctioned for its part in aiding Russia with the incursion against Ukraine. Both delegations will be excluded from the medal table, and the IPC said it would not hold events in either country. And before we close the bulletin, a relook at the top stories of the day. Potential Third World War would involve nuclear weapons, warns Russian Foreign Minister. Bombings, meanwhile, continue in Ukrainian cities. Indian nationals told to leave Kharkiv immediately. Operation Ganga brings home more people. IAF plane leaves for Romania with relief material for Ukraine. India is adopting a calibrated approach on global developments. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu urges everyone to speak in one voice on Ukraine. Joe Biden's State of the Union address expresses solidarity with the Ukrainian people, announces release of 30 million barrels to keep oil prices stable. Important for India to be self-reliant in a fast-changing world, Prime Minister Modi calls for minimizing dependence on foreign countries in the field of communication. And sixth phase voting in Uttar Pradesh tomorrow. All parties intensify campaigning for the last phase in UP and Manipur. So that's it from us in this bulletin. Thanks very much for your time.